Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion. We are here to delve into a significant question. Should the voting age be lowered to 16? This is a topic that sparks considerable debate, touching upon issues of rights, responsibility, and the very nature of democratic participation. Joining us are three distinguished guests: Ms. Chloe Dubois, a fervent advocate for youth rights; Mr. James Anderson, a seasoned political analyst; and Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a developmental psychologist. Each will offer their unique perspectives, starting with opening statements, followed by rebuttals and a moderated discussion, before concluding with their final thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah. The right to vote is the cornerstone of any democracy, a fundamental means by which citizens shape their society and their future. Lowering the voting age to 16 is not merely a symbolic gesture. It is an essential step towards a more inclusive and truly representative democracy. It is a recognition that young people are not just passive observers, but active stakeholders in our communities. Consider the inherent unfairness. At 16, individuals can work full-time, they contribute through taxes, and in some jurisdictions they can even face the full force of the adult justice system. If society deems them responsible enough for these burdens, how can we then deny them a voice in electing the governments that impose these responsibilities? Furthermore, lowering the voting age has the potential to dramatically increase youth engagement in the political process. By inviting them into the democratic fold earlier, we can cultivate habits of civic participation that last a lifetime, leading to a more informed and active citizenry overall. Decisions made today, particularly concerning critical issues like climate change, education reform, and economic stability, will disproportionately impact our younger generations for decades to come. They deserve a direct say in these policies that will define the world they inherit. Some may argue that 16-year-olds lack maturity, but this argument often underestimates them. In an age of unprecedented access to information and with evolving educational standards, many 16-year-olds possess sophisticated critical thinking skills. They are capable of understanding complex issues and making considered choices, just as much as, if not more than, some adult voters. It's time we acknowledge their capacity and empower them with the vote.
Thank you. While I wholeheartedly agree on the importance of engaging our youth in civic life, I must express significant reservations about lowering the voting age to 16 for national elections. It's not a question of diminishing their value, but rather of considering the appropriate age at which the weighty responsibility of voting should be conferred. My primary concern lies with the developmental stage of a typical 16-year-old. The human brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and complex decision-making, is still undergoing significant development well into the early 20s. This isn't to say 16-year-olds are incapable of thought, but their capacity for the kind of nuanced judgment required in voting is, on average, not yet fully matured. Moreover, most 16-year-olds have limited direct life experience when it comes to the broader responsibilities that often shape political perspectives. Fewer have managed independent households, navigated complex financial obligations, or held long-term employment, all of which provide a practical grounding for political understanding. This lack of lived experience can make them more susceptible to idealistic but perhaps impractical policies, or even to populist rhetoric and peer influence, which can be amplified in school environments. We must also consider the potential for external manipulation, whether from political campaigns specifically targeting their developmental stage, or from pervasive social media trends. The current voting age of 18 is not arbitrary. It is a standard adopted by a vast majority of countries worldwide, reflecting a broad consensus on when young adults typically achieve a baseline level of maturity and independence suitable for voting. Changing this standard should not be undertaken lightly, as it could have unforeseen consequences for the stability and quality of our democratic processes. There are many avenues for political engagement for under 18s that don't involve the formal act of voting in national elections.
Thank you for inviting me. From a developmental psychology standpoint, the question of whether 16-year-olds are ready to vote is complex. with valid points on both sides. It's useful to distinguish between cold cognition and hot cognition. Cold cognition refers to logical reasoning and decision-making in calm, low-pressure situations, like carefully considering options in a voting booth. Research indicates that by age 16, most adolescents have developed the cognitive abilities for cold decision-making to a level comparable with adults. They can typically understand and evaluate information, weigh pros and cons, and make reasoned choices when emotions are not running high. However, hot cognition involves decision-making in emotionally charged contexts or under social pressure. This is an area where adolescents can show more variability and may differ more significantly from adults as their emotional regulation skills are still developing. The development of civic knowledge and political interest is also crucial. These are not solely age-dependent, but are heavily influenced by education, family environment, and societal engagement opportunities. A 16-year-old in a supportive environment with good civic education might be better informed than a disengaged adult. It's also important to acknowledge the significant individual variability in development. Chronological age is not a perfect proxy for maturity or competence. Internationally, some countries like Austria, Brazil, and Scotland, for certain elections, have lowered the voting age to 16. Initial studies from places like Austria suggest that 16 and 17-year-olds do participate, and their choices don't drastically differ from the slightly older youth electorate, nor do they appear to vote less responsibly. However, the long-term societal impacts are still being studied, and context matters greatly.
Mr. Anderson, your points about maturity and political knowledge are often raised, but I find them somewhat selective. Are we truly to believe that every voter over 18 possesses comprehensive political knowledge and is immune to influence or emotional decision-making? The evidence suggests otherwise. Many adults, for various reasons, may not be fully informed or may vote based on limited understanding or strong emotions. This is not a phenomenon exclusive to 16-year-olds. Furthermore, robust civic education programs, which should be a priority regardless, can effectively prepare 16 and 17-year-olds for the responsibilities of voting. The argument about, quote, limited life experience can also be a slippery slope. It could historically, and sometimes still does, serve to disenfranchise various groups of adults who might lack certain types of mainstream experiences. Dr. Tanaka's distinction regarding cold cognition is vital here. The act of voting, marking a ballot in private, is precisely the kind of calm, reasoned decision-making environment where 16-year-olds' cognitive abilities are on par with adults. We should focus on that capacity, not on hypothetical, emotional scenarios that affect voters of all ages.
Ms. Dubois, while I acknowledge that 16-year-olds do shoulder some responsibilities, it's a mischaracterization to equate these with the full spectrum of adult responsibilities that typically inform voting decisions over a lifetime. Paying some taxes on a part-time job is not the same as managing a mortgage, navigating healthcare for a family, or understanding the complexities of pension schemes, experiences which often deepen political engagement. Dr. Tanaka's insights are valuable, and I accept the point about cold cognition abilities. However, he also highlighted the, quote, variability in development and the distinct challenges posed by, quote, hot cognition, the emotional and social pressures that undeniably shape political opinions and discourse leading up to the vote itself. This is where the concern about susceptibility to influence and less developed emotional maturity becomes particularly salient for a younger age group. While civic education is indeed important, and I support its enhancement, I remain skeptical that it can fully compensate for the broader emotional maturity and lived experience that contribute to more grounded political judgment. It is one component, but not a panacea for the developmental differences we are discussing.
Dr. Tanaka, Mr. Anderson raises the issue of, quote, hot cognition and emotional maturity. How significant a factor is this in the context of a 16-year-old's voting capability, especially with modern media influences?
That's a very pertinent question. Emotional regulation. The ability to manage and respond to emotional experiences appropriately is indeed still developing in adolescence. In situations involving hot cognition, such as intense political debates, exposure to persuasive or emotionally charged media, or discussions within peer groups, adolescents might be more susceptible to making impulsive judgments, compared to adults with more developed emotional regulation skills. This isn't to say they are irrational, but the balance between emotional input and cognitive reasoning can be different. However, it's also crucial to note that these risks are not insurmountable and are not unique to adolescents, though they may be more pronounced. Structured environments, such as schools that actively promote media literacy, critical thinking, and respectful debate, can play a significant role in mitigating these risks by helping young people develop the skills to navigate such influences. Ultimately, the family and school environment and the quality of civic education they receive are critical in shaping their readiness and resilience.
Ms. Dubois, how would you respond to this concern about emotional maturity and the potential for undue media influence on this age group when it comes to political decision-making?
Thank you. Firstly, I believe we often underestimate young people's savviness with modern media. They've grown up as digital natives and are often more adept at identifying misinformation or understanding online dynamics than older generations. Secondly, engagement itself is a powerful teacher. The very act of participating in the political process, knowing their vote matters, can foster a greater sense of responsibility and encourage more mature consideration of the issues. We learn and mature by doing, not by being excluded until an arbitrary age.
Mr. Anderson, Dr. Tanaka mentioned mitigating factors like robust civic education and supportive environments. Do such possibilities alleviate some of your concerns regarding the readiness of 16-year-olds?
They certainly point in a positive direction, and I am a strong proponent of improving civic education universally. However, potential and, quote, ideal conditions are different from the current reality across the board. My concern is that the quality and depth of such education and support systems are not yet consistently high enough nationwide to prepare the majority of 16-year-olds for the complexities of national voting. It remains one important piece of a larger puzzle, but it doesn't, in my view, fully bridge the developmental gap at this time.
Throughout this discussion, we've heard arguments centering on maturity and experience, but I urge us to return to the fundamental principles of democratic fairness and inclusion. 16 and 17-year-olds are knowledgeable, passionate, and invested in their futures that are directly shaped by the governments they currently have no power to choose. Lowering the voting age is an opportunity to invigorate our democracy, to foster lifelong civic engagement from an earlier age, and to ensure our political system is truly representative of all its people. The evidence from countries that have embraced this change shows that young people can and do participate responsibly. They are not a monolithic bloc, nor are they inherently less capable of making informed choices than any other demographic group. Let us not underestimate their potential or deny them their voice on the pretext of protection or unpreparedness. Instead, let's trust our young people. Let's invest in their civic future by extending to them the most fundamental right in a democracy, the right to vote. It's time to build a more inclusive and forward-looking electorate.
We have indeed had a robust discussion. My position remains that while the enthusiasm and potential of our youth are undeniable, lowering the voting age to 16 at this juncture presents more risks than benefits for our democratic process. The concerns regarding developmental readiness, the average lack of comprehensive life experience that informs political judgment, and the potential for increased susceptibility to emotionally driven influences are significant. These are not meant to disparage young people, but to acknowledge a stage of life that, for most, is still primarily focused on education and personal development, rather than the broader societal responsibilities that voting entails. Maintaining the voting age at 18 is a prudent approach. It aligns with international norms and generally coincides with other significant transitions to legal adulthood, providing a more consistent threshold for such a serious civic duty. There are numerous impactful ways for young people under 18 to engage in the political sphere, through youth councils, advocacy, community service, and robust debate within their educational institutions. These avenues foster civic skills without prematurely burdening them with the complexities and potential pressures of national electoral choices. Therefore, I conclude that while we must continually strive to improve civic education and engagement for all ages, the arguments for maintaining the current voting age of 18 remain more compelling for the overall health and stability of our democracy.
Thank you, Ms. Dubois, Mr. Anderson, and Dr. Tanaka, for your insightful and thought-provoking contributions to this important debate today. We've heard compelling arguments from Ms. Dubois emphasizing fairness, representation, and the potential for enhanced civic engagement by including 16-year-olds. Mr. Anderson has raised cautions regarding developmental maturity, life experience, and the established standard of age 18. And Dr. Tanaka has provided valuable psychological context on cognitive abilities versus emotional maturity, and the role of environment and education. This discussion has certainly highlighted the many facets of the question. Should the voting age be lowered to 16? We encourage our audience to reflect on all the points raised as they form their own opinions on this evolving issue. Thank you for joining us.